Hiya! My question for you guys today is, what would Chuck do? And before I tell you what Chuck did for me, what my dad did for me, I want to thank my cousin Aubrey and her family. I'm sure helped. She cut Cricket out a lot of letters for our entire family to make us these shirts that have his favorite sayings on. And just reminder of, I have to say shout out to Brad for coming up with this saying shortly after I was about to go home for my dad's craniotomy at the end of August in 2023. And it was just it was a lot of emotions, and my dad and Brad reminded me, just have that positive attitude. Always think about, what would Chuck do? What would Chuck do? What would Chuck do? Which my daughter Daisy sings all the time. What would Chuck do? What would Chuck do? What would Chuck do? It's so cute. So I want to share little things about what Chuck did for me. He just always said yes. If you know my dad, you know he's the Energizer Bunny. For me, he was a yes man. He'd say yes to going out to practice pitching, taking me to the tennis court, buying me whatever candy I wanted, staying the night at my cousin's house after family gatherings, going to the YMCA. He was just always up for fun. And whenever he arrived at a party, he'd say, "Chuck here." He was just ready to party, ready to spread some smiles and laughs, usually stirring the pot. He'd get his hands out and love stirring the pot. Maybe a little bit too much with my mom sometimes, but he'd play his guitar all the time. If you know my dad, you know he loved to play his guitar. I grew up with him driving down the road playing his guitar. He would tape the responsorial psalm to the middle of the steering wheel and play the guitar while he's driving with his knee. I thought it was totally normal until maybe one of my friends were a little concerned, but honestly, it's definitely not worse than how people are on their cell phones, looking down, not paying attention at all. He was always watching the road, just playing his guitar and practicing, driving down the road all the way down to Florida and back. He'd be playing his guitar. And of course at church and everywhere else, wherever he had his guitar, he would keep it in the car and he'd pull it out. My dad was just one of my biggest fans, and anybody's. If you were talking to him, he made you feel like you were his biggest fan too. But he would try to steal some time when I was talking to my mom just to ask me how I was doing, how my kids are doing, how Brad's doing, just really checking in and making sure I was doing okay, or if he could help me solve anything, or how our cars were doing. He always helped with our cars. We still have 2 of our cars are presents from my dad. So we never had a car payment. That's what Chuck would do, not have a car payment, fix, get the junker cars that have a lot of character, but hey, they take you down the road. My dad would answer the phone, "God's peace be with you." That was one of the sayings. Instead of hello. And sometimes maybe my friends would call and hang up thinking they got a church, but until they realized, nope, that's just my dad. So he just loved to have high energy. He loved to spread smiles. If you asked how my dad was doing, he'd say, "Living the dream." And that's just how it was. And all the way to the end, he was just so gracious. When I asked him how he could handle his diagnosis and him going paralyzed at the end was really hard, probably harder for his family than him, because he just took it in stride and was so confident in saying, "This is the life God gave me." And he was honestly just so grateful for it all, and just had he just went out like a king with all of his, surrounded by his family and surrounded by so much love. So if you have any stories about what would Chuck do, please tell me. Make me smile today. Thanks so much.